In Guatemala, the Constitutional Court discusses in a special full session the injunction granted by the Supreme Electoral Court to prevent new obstacles to the electoral process. In Spain, preparations continue ahead of Sunday's general elections. The Ministry of Interior deployed over 90,000 security officers to guarantee public order. And in Iraq, the Foreign Ministry announced that they will convene a summit of Islamic countries to address offenses against the Quran and other sacred symbols. Hello, welcome to From the South. I'm Luis Alberto Matos from the teleSUR studios in Havana, Cuba. We begin with the news. The National Assembly of the People's Power of Cuba has analyzed the economic situation after the end of the pandemic. They recognize a complex scenario, but they will not allow speculation or abuse. The Minister of Finance and Prices, Vladimir Regueiro, presented a report on the effectiveness of the measures adopted for price control to the deputies. The document explains a scenario which, although not exclusive to Cuba, as it is suffered by numerous countries in the world, is a little more complex due to the negative effects of the illegal blockade imposed by Washington on the island. According to the report, the price index registered a 39% growth. Guatemala's Constitutional Court discusses in a special full session the injunction granted by the Supreme Electoral Court to prevent new obstacles to the electoral process. The injunction requested early Friday morning asks the entity to prevent a group of 7 officials from issuing orders that would interrupt the end of the electoral process. It is expected that during this Saturday, the highest authorities will disclose its verdict. Meanwhile, the national government claimed to be surprised by the court's action and highlighted the security deployment to guarantee order in the process. Also in Guatemala, the prosecutor's office and agents of the National Civil Police raided the headquarters of the Semilla Party in search of documents evidencing the alleged falsification of signatures in the creation of the political party. After the event, the Constitutionality Court informed that the second electoral round remains in force and that this resolution issued by the 7th judge that sought to suspend the legal personality of the Semilla movement is without effect. The event occurred after the second raid carried out on Thursday at the Supreme Electoral Court and the request for an arrest warrant against the director of the Registry of Citizens, Eleonora Castillo. In the midst of this scenario, the Supreme Electoral Tribunal has reiterated its position to respect the due process of the elections.
I don't like injustices, and I see that here there are many injustices. The government does what it wants since they have already bought everything. Where do we go to complain? Where are we going to complain? Nowhere. And what can we do? Where can we go? If everything here is no longer useful, then I call on people to come here and to support us and to look at what is happening. Not to say that we are making it up, because this is what is really happening.
It is definitely another attack by the Public Prosecutor's Office, in the sense that yesterday they carried out a raid with an illegal arrest warrant, and today again we see that. First it was against the Registry of Citizens, and now it is against the political party Semilla movement. It seems unheard of to us that in a second round, which is already official through an agreement of the Supreme Electoral Court, which is protected by the Court of Constitutionality through a constitutional appeal, we are witnessing totally anomalous illegal acts outside the legal framework on the part of the FECI and on the part of the jurisdictional body.
In Peru, citizens mobilized to demand the release and restitution of former President Pedro Castillo. After a protest outside Barbadillo prison, where former President Castillo is being held, lawyers stated that they filed a habeas corpus suit due to different human rights violations committed against the former head of state. They affirmed that Castillo is the victim of abusive and unjustified sanctions, which caused the suspension of visits and interviews with his defense attorney. In this context, they indicated that they are even denying medical attention to Pedro Castillo, especially the attention of his attorney due to a hearing disability. And we continue in Brazil. President Luis Inácio Lula da Silva signed on Friday a decree limiting access to arms and ammunition for civilians, reversing a policy implemented by his predecessor Jair Bolsonaro. The measure was signed by the president during a ceremony at the Plan Alto Presidential Palace as part of a security action program presented together with his Minister of Security, Flavio Dino, which includes other measures and proposals to try to reduce violence in Brazil. The decree on the responsible control of weapons reduces from 4 to 2 the number of weapons and ammunition for personal defense purposes and requires a demonstration of real need to acquire them. Among other points, in addition, it reduces from 30 to 6 the number of weapons for hunters, sport shooters, and collectors. It also limits the hours of operation of shooting clubs, which must also operate at least 1 kilometer away from schools. The government also presented a bill which seeks to toughen penalties against anti-democratic acts or attacks against authorities, and another which raises penalties against violence in schools.
It is one thing for a citizen to have a gun at home for protection, for security, because some people think that having a gun at home gives them security. But we cannot allow there to be arsenals of weapons in people's hands. We will continue to fight for fewer weapons in our country. Only the police and the army must be well armed. What we need to lower is the price of books and the price of cultural activities that our children don't have access to.
In Argentina, social and human rights movements held an ethical and popular trial against the ecocides and genocides in the region. The hearing took place in the town of Libertador General San Martin in the province of Jujuy with the participation of various human rights and political organizations. During the hearing, the cases of environmental pollution and genocide committed by the Ledesma sugarcane company were presented, and the organizations denounced the cases of bagazosis that have affected the sugarcane workers and the local population. This activity took place after the march to commemorate the 47th anniversary of the Night of the Blackout, when the military dictatorship, together with the company Ledesma, kidnapped around 400 people, 33 of whom are still missing. On Friday, President Joe Biden got U.S. tech giants to pledge guardrails against risk from artificial intelligence, ranging from cyber attacks to fraud. Biden met at the White House with top representatives from Amazon, Anthropic, Google, Inflection, Meta, Microsoft, and OpenAI. Biden has put his stamp on the issue, making it clear that he recognizes the promise and peril of an industry in which U.S. companies are at the forefront of innovation. Prior to the meeting, the 7 AI giants committed to a set of self-regulatory safeguards that, according to the White House, would underscore 3 principles that must be fundamental to the future of AI: safety, security, and trust.
We must be clear-eyed and vigilant about the threats of emerging technologies that can pose, don't have to, but can pose to our democracy and our values. Americans are seeing how advanced artificial intelligence and the pace of innovation have the power to disrupt jobs and industries. These commitments are a promising step, but we have a lot more work to do together. We'll see more technology change in the next 10 years, or even in the next few years, than we've seen in the last 50 years. That has been an astounding revelation to me, quite frankly. Artificial intelligence is going to transform the lives of people around the world.
Let's take a short break, but remember you can join us on TikTok at teleSUR English, where you will find news in different formats, news updates, and much more. All the stories coming up. Stay with us. Welcome back from the South. The Spanish Ministry of Interior has already begun the deployment of some 90,282 members of state security forces that will guarantee the public order this Sunday during national elections. According to a ministerial report, 28,792 agents belonging to the National Police and some 41,054 to the Civil Guard and several autonomous communities will also deploy their regional forces. Since Friday, At 8 p.m. local time, the government started the so-called critical phase of operations aimed at protecting the final actions of the campaign on the reflection and voting day. This Saturday, at least 3 cluster munitions were fired by Ukrainian forces against the Russian town of Surovlyovka. The mayor of Belgorod province, to which the village attack belongs, reported that 21 shells also impacted the village. Yaxes Glavkov said that the 3 cluster munitions and 21 artillery shells were fired from a multiple rocket launcher. The same town was attacked with kamikaze drone and 10 shots from a grenade launcher. The regional authority confirmed that there were no casualties or material damage. Cluster munitions are banned in over 100 countries because of the high risk they pose to civilian populations. And on Friday, Russian President Vladimir Putin said that the whole world is watching Western military equipment burn and that it is even inferior in some aspects to Soviet equipment. At a meeting with the permanent members of the Council, the President indicated that although the Western teams do some damage to Russia and prolong the conflict, NATO's reserves are significantly depleted. According to Putin, the controllers of the Kiev regime are clearly disappointed with the results of the so-called counteroffensive. On the other hand, he stressed that the command of the Russian armed forces acts professionally and the Russian soldiers perform their duty to the motherland in a courageous, firm and heroic manner.
The whole world sees that the much vaunted, supposedly invulnerable Western equipment is burning, and in terms of its tactical and technical data, it is often even inferior to some of the Soviet-made weapons. Western weapons can be additionally supplied and thrown into the fight. This, of course, causes us some damage and prolongs the conflict. But first and foremost, NATO arsenals and stockpiles of old Soviet weapons in some European states are already largely depleted.
On Friday, the Russian Foreign Ministry announced that the BRICS summit will discuss the prospect of creating a new currency for member countries of the group. The statement explained that the development of firm payment and collection mechanisms, which would serve the mutual trade between member countries, is one of the key ways in the cooperation of BRICS countries. The Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs recalled that more and more countries are thinking of increasing the role of alternative currencies to the dollar in payments. The Foreign Ministry points out that it is no longer possible to fully rely on Western financial mechanisms, since Washington uses the dominant status of its national currency as a tool of political blackmail and punishment. We have a second short break coming up, but before we invite you to visit our YouTube channel at teleSUR English, there you'll be able to rewatch our interviews, top stories, special broadcastings, and more. Hit the subscribe button and activate the notification bell to stay up to date on the world's most recent events. We have a final short break, don't go away. Welcome back From the South. Iraq called for an Islamic summit in Europe to condemn burning of Quran and Iraqi flag in front of its embassy in Denmark and similar actions in Sweden. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs announced that they are mobilizing their efforts to hold an Islamic summit due to the recurring insults that have been directed towards the Holy Book. For their part, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Iran and Turkey pledged their unwavering support to the call for an Islamic summit to address the recurring repercussions of these actions against the Holy Book and Islam. Likewise, Iranian demonstrators gathered in front of the Swedish embassy in Tehran to protest and denounce Sweden's permission for protests desecrating the Quran. And protesters in Muslim nations rallied on Friday to express their outrage at the desecration of a copy of the Quran in Sweden. The demonstrations came after Swedish police permitted a protest on Thursday in which an Iraqi of Christian origin living in Stockholm threatened to burn a copy of the Quran. In the end, the man kicked and stood on the Holy Book outside of the Iraqi embassy. He gave similar treatment to an Iraqi flag and photos of influential Iraqi Shiite cleric and political leader Muqtada al-Sadr, and of Iran's supreme leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. For Muslims, any desecration of the Quran, their holy text, is abhorrent. In Iran, thousands marched in Tehran and other cities across the country, demonstrations that were aired on state television. Many protesters called for the Swedish embassy to be closed. The Democratic Republic of the Congo rushes to finish infrastructure ahead of Francophone Games that will take place from July 28 to August 6. The last edition took place in Ivory Coast in 2017. On July 20th, a delegation led by the Congolese Ministers of Sports, Foreign Affairs and Communication visited the Kinshasa site in the presence of ambassadors from French-speaking countries. 3,000 athletes from some 30 French-speaking countries will compete in the Games. Even though the event was initially scheduled for 2021, the pandemic changed the plans. Then in 2022, it was postponed again because the DRC did not have adequate infrastructure to host the event. The so-called Jeux de la Francophonie combine sporting and cultural disciplines.
I must recall here that some sites were delayed. You were at the Stadium of the Martyrs. We read it, for example, all the tartans, which was at the request of the Walloon Federation, I think, and the French Federation of Cycling, because it was a question of adapting the conditions of participation in this competition to the modern conditions of what is done elsewhere, and we made an effort to meet international standards. So at this point, the essential is done. We are waiting for the games, and for the rest, we will be rather happy for our various young people who can participate in sports competition or prepare for major competitions in modern conditions. And the DRC will be happy to receive competitions for all disciplines involved in the Francophone Games.
Hundreds of Israeli demonstrators continued their march from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem on Friday against Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's plan to reform the judiciary in the country. Protesters, on their third day of a 70-kilometer journey, plan to arrive in Jerusalem on Saturday night and camp out in front of the Israeli parliament before a key piece of reform is put to a final vote. The judicial reform pushed by Netanyahu's nationalist and religious government has deeply divided Israel, plunging it into one of its worst internal crises and even arousing the concern of its most important ally, the United States. The government says the plan aims to rein in what it sees as an overly interventionist judicial system and return power to elected officials. In Kenya, at least 4 people were injured after a police operation in the community of Nyalanda, Kisumu. The opposition denounced the actions as repressive acts by the authorities. People were wounded with firearms on the last day of protest called by the Azimio La Umoja coalition. In addition, opposition leaders reported that their homes had been raided. In this context, former Kenyan President Jomo Kenyatta urged the government to maintain boundaries with his family members, following an alleged raid by the state forces on his son's residence. In Pakistan, 112 people died as a result of floods caused by heavy rains. The National Disaster Management Authority said that half of the deaths were recorded in the province of Punjab. The number of injured increased to 185, while more than 150 houses have been affected by floods and landslides. Meteorological authorities forecast that the weather conditions will continue during the weekend, which will hamper recovery efforts. They also noted that the deadliest event of the season occurred this week in Islamabad, where 13 workers died after the collapse of a highway underpass. Colombian authorities reported at least 26 deaths in the avalanche that occurred in the department of Cundinamarca in the center of the country. The mud and water landslide that devastated several houses early last Tuesday in the town of Quetame also caused the evacuation of 100 families living between the river Negros and Contador, as the risk of a new event is not ruled out. Governor Nicolas Garcia informed that there are still people missing, so the search will be resumed this Saturday. In Guatemala, the Fuego volcano erupted with significant lava flows. The areas that will be affected are located in the west of the country. According to the National Institute of Seismology and Volcanology of Guatemala, the volcano records 5 to 11 weak and moderate explosions per hour. generating gas and ash plumes from 4,500 to 4,800 meters above sea level. The seismic stations continue to register weak explosions which generate avalanches from the top of the dome in all directions. For this reason, authorities urge the population to take the corresponding measures. We have come to the end of this news briefing. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. You can also join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. For TeleSUR English, I'm Luis Alberto Matos. Thank you for watching.